Good afternoon and welcome to 30-Minute Mondays webinar series, Alcohol Testing for DOT and Non-DOT Compliance during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Jessica Polk of the Current Consulting Group, and we'd like to welcome you on today's call. And with that, we would like to turn the time over to Bill Current.
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome everybody to today's 30-Minute Monday webinar. Let me just give a shout out to Orsher Technologies for hosting and sponsoring these wonderful weekly 30-minute webinar series presentations. And I'll be leading the discussion today with one of my favorite people in the drug testing industry, Jan Corman, and she will be talking specifically to the questions that you've been asking. We want to remind you that on May 11th, that's next Monday, will be the next 30-minute Monday webinar presented by Orsher Technologies, and you can see the schedule there. There won't be one on May 25th for Memorial Day, but then we'll be back on June 1st. So May 11th, May 18th, and then June 1st for the other three in this series. Jan Corman's been in the drug testing industry a good long time. I know she looks pretty young there in that picture, but she's been doing this for a long time and she really knows what she's talking about. She is one of the leaders of the NDASA organization. Many of you familiar with NDASA, and they were the only drug and alcohol testing industry association to get their annual conference in right there at the very, very beginning of March. We had a great time out in Jacksonville, Florida. And Jan is known for a lot of different things in the industry, but she is a top quality trainer for supervisors and managers and signs and symptoms training, both for DOT and non-DOT. And she knows a lot about alcohol testing. And so we're gonna get into some questions here in a minute. Let me just give you some statistics to start with. In the United States, every year, SAMHSA does a survey called the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. It's been going on for lots and lots of years. Back into the 70s, it had different names, but it's always been the same format. And alcohol is the #1 substance of abuse, as you can see there on the chart on the right, of all the different substances: alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, the top three. We also know that during a national crisis, substance abuse rises significantly. And so in a study done after 9/11, alcohol abuse in the city of New York and in the state of New York increased significantly, as you can see from the bar graph on the right. And so we're going through a national crisis, of course, and we're already seeing a significant increase in people using and misusing and abusing alcohol. This was a study done by alcohol.org. If you go to that website, you'll find an interactive map where you can press on the state and it will tell you the percentage of workers in that state who admit, and these are people working from home, who admit to drinking alcohol while working from home. Hawaii, #1 at 67%, Virginia, New Hampshire tied for second at 50%, Arkansas down at the bottom at 8%, but most of the states were somewhere around the 30 to 40% range, meaning about 30 to 40% of workers now working from home, perhaps for the first time ever in their careers, admit to drinking while they're working. And we've seen a significant increase in the sale of alcoholic beverages online and in stores since the pandemic began. As you can see, US sales of alcoholic beverages rose 55% in the week ending March 21st, and that was a month ago now. Sales of spirits like tequila, gin, premixed cocktails up 75%, wine up 66%, beer up 42%, and online sales far outdistance in-store purchases. So a lot going on in that area, and we need to realize that as the pandemic starts to come to an end and people start looking for work again, they're going to come back having spent the last X number of weeks abusing drugs and alcohol. And so that leads us to our topic today. Jan and I are going to talk about, and she's going to do most of the talking, we're going to talk about saliva alcohol testing for DOT and non-DOT compliance during the pandemic. And there are a lot of questions. We got tons of questions submitted in advance. We tried to work them into this set list of questions that are on these next two slides, as well as any questions that you want to ask today. So without any further delay, let's get to the first question. Jan, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So under the circumstances, and I know you deal with lots of employers from lots of different industries, and you also deal with other drug and alcohol testing providers, what are some of the challenges that employers are experiencing trying to get their alcohol testing done during the pandemic?
I think the biggest thing out there that people are finding is they want to make a decision, should we go on and keep using the breath alcohol equipment? Do we use evidential breath testers, or how can we do that? How can we keep ourselves in distancing from the people that we're testing? And then the cleaning of the devices. And so it's hard for people to stop and think about when they're doing a breath alcohol, how do they position themselves? What do they have to do? But if you think about it, it can be done. A lot of times in the training, we never told people that they had to wear gloves when they did it. Well, nowadays we have you wash your hands and put on gloves and to stand back. And the problem is you need to keep a hold of that evidential breath tester. And so arm's length sometimes is not 6 feet, as we all know. But if you can, and you're going to be doing it, you need to position yourself so it doesn't blow into your face or into the technician's face when they're doing it. And so you have to pretty much distance yourself as far as how you're going to be looking at your devices at times too. Still should probably be wearing facial coverings of some sort, like the CDC has it recommended. So if you've got your gloves on, you wear your face mask, whatever you've got on, you can probably doing the testing if you keep yourself somewhat away from where that breath is going to be coming out of the machine. What some people have been saying is, because we've only allowed one person in the collection area at one time, it's easier than it used to be when you'd have a small little room that you had to do it in. Now people are able to do it in a bigger room. Sometimes if you can have a window open, up here you wouldn't want to do that today, it's pretty cool. But if you're someplace where it's warmer, if you're by a door or window, you'd want them blowing towards that to suck it out. Then the next thing comes along once you use that machine. What are you going to do as far as cleaning it afterwards? And you really probably need to use some antimicrobitic, disinfectant of some sort, which does not contain alcohol, without saying. Something that maybe a bleach base, just wiping down your equipment. And then using caution when you're using hand sanitizers, because we've always been in our training saying hand sanitizers can actually trigger a air blank to be positive. You wouldn't want to be using hand sanitizers. So again, use hand washing that CDC tells you to do. Put on your gloves. You won't have to use hand sanitizer. And then we do not want the donor touching the equipment. So mainly what you're going to be doing is putting on that new mouthpiece and a fresh, clean one every time. And when you take it off after they've blown in the device, be sure you don't touch the wet end that they've blown in, and utilize the injection on the machine to actually throw it away right into the garbage so you don't have to touch it. Basically, I think that's what people are trying to say is, are they still going to be able to do the breath alcohol? You can do it, but you have to be cautious. So in secondhand, what we're saying to do is maybe go to using the saliva testing, Bill. That's probably what a lot of people have been doing, if they've been doing them at all. Some people actually have stopped doing them.
Okay, so let's go down to the second from bottom bullet. Do the DOT regulations permit saliva alcohol tests?
Yes, they do. And they do allow using saliva testing. It's the alcohol screening devices. And if you look under the website, www.transportation.gov/ODAPSA, you can look and find out which devices are okay to use as only for the screening testing, however.
So going back up to the second bullet, then it says QED. For our audience, QED is a saliva alcohol test that is produced by OraSure Technologies. So is the QED alcohol screening device on the conforming products list? Is that permitted under the DOT regulations?
Yes, it is. It's permitted under the DOT regs. It is listed under there as a QED. And I'll go back. I just have to share this with a lot of people. A lot of people said, well, what does QED stand for? But it's a quantitative enzyme device. So it is an alcohol screening device that has been gone through the testing. And when they go through the testing, of course, it's approved by the DOT before it gets put onto that listing for a alcohol screening device.
Okay, so So alcohol testing is approved, and QED obviously isn't the only saliva alcohol testing device, but it is one of those that has been approved. What happens then? And I know some of our audience probably knows this, but gauging by the questions that we got from the audience ahead of time, what happens then when somebody uses an alcohol screening device and it's positive? What is that good enough, or what happens next?
Okay, so the rules have not changed there, whether you're using an alcohol screening device or if you're using an evidential breath tester as your initial screener. If it does come up greater than the 0.020, you do have to wait and do a confirmation test. The confirmation test has to be done after 15 minutes, but not longer than 30 minutes. So if you look under the regulations, the 40.251 regulations, it's going to outline this for everybody. But basically, you do have to follow up anything that's greater than 0.20 with a confirmation test between that 15 and 30 minutes. Well, the other question always comes out then, what I get is, well, what if it goes beyond that 30 minutes? And at that point, remember, as the technicians, we still need to do the confirmation test, document why it didn't happen. And if anything, who will get the sanctions against them might be the employer for it being outside that limit. But document that. I can't stress enough when I'm doing training. Anything that happens out of the ordinary, document it. Write it down under the remarks section so you have a backup once somebody comes to you and asks you what happened.
Okay, so let's say that a company's having trouble right now getting breath alcohol tests done, and they're interested in saliva alcohol testing as a way, and the majority of these random tests, especially, alcohol tests are, well, let me ask you, are the majority of alcohol tests negative or positive per the regulations? Do you see a trend?
Basically, it depends upon the location they're at. Right here where I'm at in South Dakota, I very seldom get very many positive alcohols, even doing randoms, but occasionally it does happen. Now, if you're in certain areas where there's more things going on, and I can say truthfully right now with what's going on with the pandemic, like you said, there's more people using alcohol than they normally had. Probably the trend is going to go to having more positives.
Okay, and you're getting maybe more positive, generally speaking. Employers having trouble being able to get an evidentiary breath test done. They want to turn to saliva alcohol testing. How do you become certified to perform saliva alcohol testing? Can employees in the company be certified to do the test, or what's required there?
Well, that's been a real good question. I actually called into ODAPSI and talked to someone there myself on this. The rules state that you have to be trained on the specific device that you are utilizing, along with mock collections on them. So what you would have to do is, following the screening test technician model under the DOT, you would at least have to have the last unit of the training. If you are already a breath alcohol technician, you can't just automatically go and use them unless you've had that specific training. Now, if you're new and have not been doing any breath alcohols, you would have to go through the whole training of the screening test technician. Currently, I've been doing some of those trainings with people because they are breath alcohol technicians and they don't want to be using their evidential breath testers, so they have been using those and getting the training on them. So yes, they do need to have training, can't use them without.
Okay, and I know you've been doing this a long time. You're widely considered a great expert in this area. How would you compare saliva alcohol testing to evidentiary breath testing for alcohol? How accurate are saliva alcohol tests?
I get that question a lot of times. So this is not a new question to me. And it goes back to way back when I started training on the QEDs. Is actually OraSure had done some comparisons to blood alcohol using the GC, gas chromatography, and compared it to the saliva testing. And actually, when they did compare it to, there were no false positives or false negative results in the comparison that they did. And I'm sure they routinely are checking out the devices every single time when they do new lot numbers too, so we can be assured that they are good and accurate testing when we are using them.
Okay, so what's involved then in collecting a saliva sample?
Okay, it's very simple, actually. First off, you want to make sure someone who comes in to have the saliva test done for the QEDs, that you wait at least 10 minutes after they get with you, because you want to make sure they have not had anything in their mouth, they haven't ate recently, have nicotine in their mouth, et cetera, et cetera. So what we can do during this time is you can explain to them, fill out their alcohol testing form, step 1, have them sign step 2, that they're agreeing to have the testing done. Then what you're going to do is open up one of the device packages, take out the paddle there with the swab on the end, and you're going to instruct the donor how they're going to swab their own mouth. So once you show them that they're going to swab the front of their teeth, at the tongue, underneath their tongue, etc., and then you're going to tell them that when they're done doing that, I'm going to give you a time limit. I'm going to ask you to put it into this device here that I'm going to be sitting, and you take the device out and lay it flat so that they can see what you're doing. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand back from them. They're 6 feet. Let them come up, pick up the device, and start swabbing their mouth. Now you give them 30 to 60 seconds to swab their mouth, and then when they're done with it, they take it out of their mouth. You're going to have them put into the device, into the portal down there. Ask them to step back away, so you keep that distancing away from them. And then the technician's going to come and push it down into the device until it goes all the way, the fluid goes all the way up to the QA spot. When it gets to the QA spot, you're going to see that it turns kind of a purplish color. You're going to have the technician set a timer for 2 minutes. At the end of the 2 minutes, then they're just going to read it and see if there's any alcohol. If there's no alcohol, it looks like you're reading a temperature, a thermometer actually, when you're doing this, but you're going to see that a purple line will go up. Even if there's bubbles, you're going to look for the top of the purple line, and you'll be able to read it. Once you read it, you could step back, and then you're going to show the donor to look at it and say, you can see where we have got a positive or a negative there, so that they're aware of what the test results is. So it's really pretty simple. It's quick and it's simple, and it doesn't take very long time for you to get the results this way either.
And is there chain of custody paperwork that you've got to file with the test result?
Right, because now you've done step 3, then you're going to go to step 3, and the technician's going to go over and mark themselves as, if they're a BAT, a breath alcohol technician, or if they're going to mark themselves as an STT screening technician, they're going to mark that they did a saliva test at that point. Then they're going to write in the results under step 3. So they're going to put down, like they use a QAD, what the lot number was, the expiration date, which they've already should have shown the donor before they've done the testing, so they know they're using one that's not expired. Put down the time that they activated it, time that they read it, and then the results are going to go there under step 3. Now, if there's nothing to write in the remarks section, the technician goes and they sign it, and they print their name and put their company address where they're doing the testing. Also, we'll sign it, and if it's negative, they're done. If it's greater than 0.20 on the device when they read it, then they're going to be having to do a confirmation test, which, like I say, you would be going to the breath alcohol technician then. Now, if you're the BAT, they can still keep going on with the alcohol testing form and completing the breath test on that form. But if they're going to send them to someone else to do the confirmation test, the screening test technician will finish that form and hand that to the donor. Then what we're going to tell them, if it's positive, that they're not to eat, drink, put anything in their mouth, or belch. And if they do, we will still go ahead and do the confirmation testing. But in that period, that 15-minute period of time, then they need to be observed before we can do the confirmation test too. So they're not just left to go down the street by themselves, get in the car and drive somewhere else. I hope they have someone taking them there and watching their observation.
Right, best practices, of course.
Right,
now,
right.
We're getting a lot of questions, so I want to kind of fast forward just a little bit, and I want to make sure we don't skip to the last question, because I know that's on a lot of people's minds. But
Okay.
there have been a couple of questions submitted on, again, going back to the DOT regulations, and a couple of them have to do with the second to last bullet, just coincidentally. So How about that? Federal Transit, Federal Aviation, do they permit saliva alcohol testing?
I understand whatever the regulations said before, we still need to do. Basically, the DOT on their guidance that they sent out on March 23rd, they pretty much said, if you can get your things done as it has been done all the time, you should stick to it.
Okay.
They haven't really given any waivers.
Okay. So you made an interesting reference there to a company's policy. So whether it's DOT or non-DOT, if the policy doesn't mention the possibility or the option that the company would do saliva alcohol testing, would you recommend that they update their policy to include some language that covers saliva alcohol testing?
If they're going to plan on going to using saliva, they most definitely must do that. I think you may also have to look at some state laws too, don't you, Bill, as far as if it's even okay in certain states?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah.
And so the policy is very important then, that it reflects what you're actually doing in your company. So if in the past you were always relying on breath alcohol testing, and now under the circumstances you're going to start using saliva alcohol screens, you definitely need to update your policy and add some language that includes that, and make sure that you're in compliance with all the state laws that apply to you. A couple of other questions that were submitted, and some of them really, for the most part, Jan, you've covered. Maybe it was some people came on a little bit late, but Federal Motor Carrier, for example, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they do permit saliva alcohol testing, correct?
Correct. Yes, they do.
Okay, and then some people are asking questions that are a little bit saliva alcohol screening, breath alcohol testing, and maybe applies to both, but I'll just ask the questions. I won't try to interpret what they meant, but but this probably sounds like a good question. Do we need to have some type of air cleaner to eliminate air contaminants while doing the testing? Have you had that happen or come up?
I have not heard about that, but you'd have to be very, very cautious and make sure they don't have alcohol base in them. Because even by spraying it, if it's got alcohol base in it, you could influence both the saliva or the breath test, whichever one you're doing. So.
Okay, and are you seeing employers in your business starting to do more saliva alcohol testing? Is that a trend?
Right now, yes. Who knows what it's going to mean in the future? And I know Bill and you and I talked before about this. Is our new norm? What's our new norm going to be as far as that? Are people going to start using them and keep using them, or are they going to go back to using their breath testers? And that's going to be all new to all of us to see what direction it's going to go. I don't know.
Well, and I know that you're very active in NDASA, and NDASA has been doing a series of virtual town hall meetings. So in the town hall meetings that you've been participating in, I mean, what are you hearing from people? For example, are laboratories slow in getting drug test results back because they're doing a lot of COVID testing? Are you seeing any impact on drug testing through the laboratories because of the pandemic?
I think basically a lot of the testing has been put on hold. Most of our random testing on a lot of different places are not being completed because they're not working. So as far as getting results back, I personally, I've been getting mine back just like I always have. So that has not been an issue with it. And I did not hear anybody on the town hall say anything about not getting results back in a timely fashion either. So.
Okay. So drug testing results are coming back, negatives within 24 hours, positives, within 48 to 72 hours. Just that the volume is down.
Right.
Okay, so let's delve a little bit more into that last bullet, because I know our audience would like to know what you think. I mean, this is now your opinion, of course, and maybe things you're hearing through the NDASA town halls, et cetera, but what do you think might be the sort of longer lasting impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on drug and alcohol testing in the future?
I truthfully think right now what's happening is, if anything positive about the whole situation that we've been in, is that it's going to be a new norm. that we all want to go back to normal, but it's going to be a new norm. And I think people are going to use more sensible procedures in doing things, wearing gloves. In fact, I heard on the town hall the other day, one organization actually double gloves when they're doing testing. I think maybe staying away from our donors. I know when people fill out the forms, I tell people it's a good place to market your ink pens, because you tell them to use the ink pen, they can take it home with them. So things will be changing in that respect, just our procedures. The policies may change. I'm sure that DOT is going to look at what's happened and come up with some interesting information in the end result. I don't know, Bill. I don't know if this means we're going to be doing more saliva testing or not. Maybe people will find out they're just as easy. QEDs are easy to use, so it's not out of the question that people aren't going to go to using them.
Well, and it's also interesting, isn't it, that it was just, late last year when SAMHSA issued the final guidelines for lab-based oral fluid testing, the first thing of this nature in 30 years under the SAMHSA guidelines. And then suddenly we find ourselves in a position where people are not necessarily uncomfortable with the oral or with the urine sample itself, but just with the process of collecting a sample. And I know you have continued to provide your services, but we have heard, and we did an entire mini webinar on this just last week with Brian Feely from OraSure, where we talked about the fact that there are just numerous reports from around the country of employers finding it difficult to find a collection site that is either open or willing to do a urine collection. And so oral fluid drug testing becomes an option. And of course, it coincides with the fact that for the first time in 30 years, SAMHSA has developed regulations for a different testing method. And now going forward, as we look at the future, does that mean more alcohol testing with saliva, more drug testing with oral fluid? We don't know, right? But every time somebody talks about sort of going back to normal, I always think to myself, we have no idea what normal is going to look like, but it's probably not going to look like normal. I mean, right. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Right. It's going to be a whole new way of looking at things. And like I said, maybe it's for the good. Maybe we haven't been protecting ourselves enough.
Yeah. Well, and that's a possibility. Now, we promised to keep this to 30 minutes, and we're at the 30-minute mark. If you would like to reach Jan, you can reach her at her website, which is coremanagementservices.com. That's KOR, and then the word management, and then the word services.com. Or you can reach her at 605-758-2325. 605-758-2325, or you can get in touch with OraSure Technologies at the different, the address, the email, and the website that you see on the screen right now. We will be back next week with another 30-minute Monday webinar series as part of the series, combining urine and oral fluid testing in the same program. Jan, anything you want to say in conclusion?
All I can say is if you're going to be using saliva testing, you can always get a hold of me and I can go through it with you and train you. And NDASA has actually got training going on right now too. So you could go to www.ndasa.com/training and you could sign up for it there too.
Perfect. Thank you, Jan from Core Management Services. And this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll be back again next Monday.
Thank you, and stay safe.